So, shall we start? Okay, so let's go with tier 1. It's fairly simple. So, Final Fantasy XIII was originally a PS2 game. Pretty straightforward. It was designed to be on the PS2. There's lots of kind of concept models and stuff around. You can see snow was planned as early as the PS2 version, but it got ported. And I think a big reason for that is because with the PS3 coming out, it's obviously a new system. You want to have like a new release on the new system, bring up hype. But it was also because of the tech demo for Final Fantasy VII. It wasn't like a remake of Final Fantasy VII, obviously we didn't get that for years. But they did like a tech demo of the kind of intro with what they could do on the PS3 and people went insane. So that influenced Final Fantasy XIII getting moved over to the PS3 instead. Which is a good move because Final Fantasy XIII looks really good on the PS3. And I'm sure it would have looked good on the PS2, but it wouldn't have looked as good. So yeah, I think it was a smart choice. And then we've got, it's the first trilogy in the series, because it is. Other games have like supplementary material. Final Fantasy X obviously had 10 too. And then years later it had the radio drama where Tidus kicks an explosive blitzball. It's so stupid. And everyone was pissed off about it. Nobody liked it. And also Orin, who literally was an ashamed monk because he wouldn't marry a priest's daughter, somehow just has a child now. It's, but we're not talking about Final Fantasy X, we're talking about 13. But yeah, first trilogy in the series. It was not planned as a trilogy from the beginning. It seems to be that Versus 13 might have been planned as a trilogy, but not the original 13. The original 13, from all accounts, it seems like it was supposed to stop after the first one, and then plans changed. Then we've got new Prelude and Victory fanfare. So up until that point, all of the Final Fantasy games used the same kind of Prelude and Victory fanfare, but 13 chose not to. They're not even similar, they're completely different songs. Related to that, it's the first mainline soundtrack not composed by Nobuo Uematsu. It is instead by, is it Masa, what was it? I can't remember his name. I think it's Masashi Hamauzu, who also did, what's that really, Dirge of Cerberus, that's it, Dirge of Cerberus. He composed that, and he also worked on the Final Fantasy VII remake. And his songs in the Final Fantasy VII remake are absolute bangers. Then we've got Final Fantasy VII was a huge influence. It's kind of obvious when you compare how both games open. They're both kind of open in the midst of things, the midst of the action. You're on a train. For our main characters that we first meet are soldiers, well, ex-soldiers. And they're also just, Cloud and Lightning are kind of assholes when you first meet them. I'd say Lightning is worse. Remake Cloud is more like Lightning, where he's kind of more of a complete dick. But Lightning is a complete asshole when you first meet her. She's great, but she is an asshole. So yeah, pretty straightforward. And again, they took a lot of influence from how good Final Fantasy VII looked on that tech demo for the PS3. Related to that, Lightning is female Cloud. Nomura has said that, yeah, Lightning was, design-wise, based off of Cloud. She's a female soldier. She took a lot of influence from Cloud. And I know a lot of people will use that as like an insult of, oh, she's so, bland, she's not, like, interesting, she's just a copy of Cloud, but not as good. Which I don't think is true. I think Lightning is a very good character, but yeah, she is female Cloud in a way. Personality-wise, she's honestly more like Squall from Final Fantasy VIII. rather than Cloud. But because again, Cloud is not that bad when you start off Final Fantasy VII, whereas Lightning and Squall are kind of huge assholes for reasons. But, you know, I'd say Lightning's a bit more personality-wise like Squall. And then Leona Lewis, so for the localization of Final Fantasy XIII, they made a bunch of changes soundtrack-wise. They didn't use the original Japanese songs, they didn't even translate them and have them sung in English, they just went for completely different songs where they were used. So, yeah, the ending theme does not get used. It's Leona Lewis's My Hands that gets used instead, which caused massive copyright for anybody who wants to do a Let's Play of Final Fantasy XIII. There's always copyright problems because of My Hands. It's so funny. It also kind of creates a different tone when it's used. I'm not incredibly against it, because Final Fantasy XIII's ending is quite bittersweet, and I feel like the original song is a bit too upbeat and poppy, whereas My Hands is a bit more fitting of like a bittersweet tone. Not that it fucking matters, because then Final Fantasy XIII 2 happens, but yeah, so I'm not as hateful of Leona Lewis's My Hands as a lot of other fans are, but it does seem like a weird choice to just switch out the original songs. And then we've got 2006 trailer differences. So basically the first trailer for Final Fantasy XIII got released at E3, and it showed Lightning, no other characters, just Lightning, looking a bit different, but we'll get into that later. Just kind of fighting and running around different locations that would eventually appear in the game. So she visits Sanlith, you can see her fighting some soldiers in Eden, you can see what is an early version of the combat system. It looks very different. Yeah, it's more a concept trailer, I suppose, for what 13 would become. There's like no hint of a plot really, it's just Lightning zooming around, being cool. And then Louis Vuitton and Prada. So everybody knows about Louis Vuitton. I feel like not enough people know about Prada, but for Louis Vuitton they did a collaboration with Square Enix after Lightning Returns came out, and Lightning modelled a bunch of clothes in their new fashion line, some of which are fucking ugly, but you know, whatever, fashion. But Prada actually did a collaboration after 13.2, and so like it's not just Lightning who gets to model in that. Snow, Noel, Saz and Hope also get to model suits in 13.2. Not the actual game, but afterwards. Meanwhile, Noctis gets to be the Cup Noodle King, but you know, can't win them all. And then we've got Eidolons equals summons. So again, it was just a change that was made. I don't really know why. But yeah, they just decided to go with a new name in 13. Which is strange because in Japanese, they are called summon beasts. So they are summons. But they are essentially these entities that are sent by the goddess of death when the characters are at a low point or at an impasse emotionally, and then you have to tame them so that you can get rid of the doom spell on yourself and you can have a summon. Everybody gets one, there is no single summoner, everybody gets them. To varying usefulness, but yeah. And then we've got the linearity, which everybody knows about with Final Fantasy XIII, that it's very linear. It's called like basically corridor simulation, which is unfair. They are very pretty corridors. And I also kind of think there's a point to the linearity, which we'll get into with theories, but it is a very linear game up until you reach Grand Pulse. And then the game opens up and you can do side quests and you can run around. But yeah, anything on Cocoon, it is very linear for the most part. There's a few little offshoots to get treasures, but you're always kind of going to be converging down one main path. And then Final Fantasy XIII-3, so Lightning Returns is the official name, but it is Final Fantasy XIII-3. It was that domain name got registered after 13.2 came out, so people were like, right, there is definitely a sequel, which, I mean, I don't know how you would see the ending of 13.2 and not think there was a sequel, but yeah. So Lightning Returns is just 13.3, but they decided to change the name because they wanted to have an emphasis on the fact that Lightning was going to be the main kind of spectacle, because she wasn't really in 13.2 a lot, despite being used in the advertising. And then another kind of just basic knowledge is that Lightning and Aerith share the same Japanese voice actress, Maya Sakamoto. Which must be quite funny if either of those characters both appear in the same kind of Dissidia game, but whatever. So moving on to tier 2, there's being fully healed after battles until Lightning Returns. This was something I saw a lot of complaints about. They did not like that you got fully healed after battles. That was a complaint with a lot of gamers at the time. I remember it. I didn't think it was a big deal because a lot of the fights can take a lot of HP, and it kind of seems like you would just have to have tons and tons of potions. Which, whatever, but I don't know, it just kind of seemed more inconvenient and boring to do that. But yeah, it works fine in Lightning Returns when you do have to use potions, but you are only playing as one character in Lightning Returns. I think if you have a party of 6 people and you're having to juggle potions all the time, that would be annoying, but whatever. And then Sarah was supposed to be the 7th party member in Final Fantasy XIII. Yep, so pretty straightforward. She was, it was planned for early on that she would be part of the team. This also relates to Fang was originally a male character, because the party was meant to be kind of balanced gender-wise. Lightning's personality was different because of this. She was supposed to be more kind of edgy and flirtier, whereas Sarah was meant to be the more innocent, straight-headed one. But then, because of cuts and stuff they had to do, Sarah get removed from the party. The flirty personality got moved on to Fang, who was made into a woman. Lightning became the more serious, stoic one. Yada yada yada. Lightning's real name, it's Eclair in Japanese, and it's Claire in English, which is an understandable change, because I don't think... I can't imagine most people in the West would hear the name Eclair and not think of the pastry. I don't know, maybe that's just me. But yeah, so they just changed it to Claire, which is just French for light, whereas Eclair is lightning. So her name is Lightning and her name is Lightning. And her surname is Farron, which is thunder. So her name is Lightning Thunder. Great. But yeah, so Eclair in Japanese and Claire in English. And then the new world at the end of Lightning Returns is Earth. So I kind of debated on whether putting this into the theory section or whether I should put this into the second tier, because it's a little wishy-washy. The answer is maybe. It maybe is Earth, but we're not entirely sure. But yeah, maybe they created Earth at the end of Final Fantasy XIII-3, aka Lightning Returns. And then we've got Auriga sang several voice tracks for 13.2. If you're familiar with Auriga, she did a bunch of songs for the Ghost in the Shell anime standalone complex. She's very prolific. She has a lot of famous songs. She's a really good singer, and she sadly passed away a few years ago. And then we have, well, we've already said that Fang was originally a male character. She got changed when Sarah got dropped from the main party, which is why her and Vanille come across as very gay. But yeah, we'll get into that later. Water Lassie. So Lassie are human thralls of the fal'Cie. So I guess I can answer these two at the same time. What are fal'Cie? fal'Cie are essentially demigods that have been created by their own deities to create tasks and maintain the world. So they do that more effectively. You complete like the kind of missions they've been given by their own superiors. They then make humans into Lassie. So Lassie are basically human thralls who are enslaved by magic, but they can now use magic and they're now a lot more resilient. If they complete a focus, they can be turned into crystal, where they're basically just put on ice until the fal'Cie needs them again. So you're essentially enslaved forever. Or you can turn into a XIII, which is a big shambling monster that is doomed to basically suffer forever until somebody can either complete your focus for you or they kill you. Okay, doke, so let's move on to... where the fuck were we? Oh, right, okay. So we discussed like what are fal'Cie, what are Lassie. So Vanille has a crystal that she can see Fang through and lightning returns. That's pretty straightforward. It is in the text of the game. It seems to be a crystal that they woke up with when they were decrystallized. When Fang went off to the desert to try and find the secret treasure, or the Holy Clavis as it's called in English, because she doesn't want Vanille to die. But Vanille keeps a piece of the crystal that they woke up with, and she's able to look through it and see Fang. And then we've got Vanille as the real main character of Final Fantasy XIII. So the answer is kind of, again, she was considered to become the kind of poster child of Final Fantasy XIII because she does have such a massive impact on the plot. But at that point they'd already made the trailer with Lightning, and so everyone kind of recognised her, so they just kind of dropped it. But she is still kind of the real main character of Final Fantasy XIII. She's the narrator of the game. A lot of the events are basically linked straight to her. A lot of the tragedies are basically linked straight to her and Fang. But there's some other stuff that's, I mean, it's difficult, but yeah, she kinda is the real main character of Final Fantasy XIII. And then we've got Lightning design change. So Lightning originally was a bit more muscular. She had darker red hair. Her name was meant to be Averia, and she was supposed to be a bit more feisty and flirty. But again, when Sarah got dropped from the party, that changed, and Fang got made into a female character. She got those kind of traits, and Lightning got the pale pink hair. She's a bit less muscular, and she's now more stoic. And then we have Norse mythology references, so there's quite a lot of those in the game. There is, of course, Odin, who is Lightning's summon. Then he will transform into Sleipnir in his Gestalt form, which is basically just their vehicle form. Then you've got, what else is it? Oh yeah, so Fang and Vanille are Leaf and Leaf Saber, which makes more sense when Fang was originally intended to be a man. But essentially those, in mythology, they are the last man and woman at the end of the world when Ragnarok comes, and they will reawaken and repopulate the earth. And then likewise, there's Ragnarok, who is destined to be the monster that will destroy Cocoon, that one of the party members is supposed to become, and that Fang already became before the game actually started. And then we've got Lassie brands have 13 stages, pretty straightforward. The same goes for whether you are a Pulse Lassie or a Cocoon Lassie. They all have 13 stages. If you don't complete your focus by the time you hit stage 13, you are going to turn into a Sith, and there's no reversing it. Well, maybe. And then we have the fal'Cie in Final Fantasy XIII want to commit genocide to bring back their deity. So that is the main kind of crux of the plot. You have, it's specifically the Cocoon fal'Cie want to kill all of the people on Cocoon so that they can bring back their deity, because they were tasked by the deity that created them, who's called Lindsay, to like basically have a mass sacrifice of humans because they're looking for a place called the Unseen Realm, and Lindsay believes that if you kill a big bunch of humans, the gate to the Unseen Realm will open up wide enough that the gods will be able to enter it. The fal'Cie are more concerned about wanting to see Lindsay again, and that's why they really want to go through with this. And then we have Noel is the last human in 13.2, so this is something related to 13.2. And yeah, Noel, who is our co-protagonist, he is the last remaining human in 13.2. It is due to a paradox, but yeah, he is the only one left. Everybody dies because the crystal pillar that was made at the end of the first game collapses. It makes the land barren, everyone gets sick, everyone starves, and he's the last one, and then he gets taken to Valhalla and given the chance to change the future. Episode 0, that is the novella that was released. That is basically a prequel to Final Fantasy XIII, gives you some insight into the characters. It shows you how Lightning and Snow first meet and how she does not like him at all. She actually sees hope in his mother, and that kind of inspires her to want to take more time for her and Sarah. Although she is really, really pissed off about like just the fact that Sarah has a boyfriend, and just like she wants her to kind of get her head on straight and just train to be a teacher instead. She's kind of an overbearing big sister, but whatever. But yeah, no, episode 0 is cool, and there's also insight into how Fang and Vanille became l'Cie during the war. Fang was the one that was meant to just become a l'Cie on her own, but she gets super pissed off and attacked a bunch of the priests during the rite, and to basically make it right so that Fang wouldn't get killed, Vanille agreed to become a l'Cie alongside her to become Ragnarok, the original Ragnarok. But it's kind of implied that Vanille was always going to try and take her chance to become a l'Cie because she didn't want to leave Fang. And then Water Safe, I've kind of already explained it. They are humans, well, l'Cie who have failed their focus, and they are doomed to become monsters forever. Except the protagonists, who are maybe saved by Etro, and maybe will themselves back to being alive again. It's not entirely clear, but yeah, most of the time, if you're a Sith, you're doomed. Then we've got down to tier 3. So, cancelled DLC in 13.2. Alright, so 13.2 has a shit ton of DLC already, because it was kind of in the boom of DLC and QuickTime events, which is also in the game a lot. But the cancelled DLC, there was supposed to be an episode where you got to play Snow, and he would be driving around Grandpa's. There was supposed to be an episode where you got to play as Hope, escaping from Augusta Tower and trying to avoid assassination. There was going to be stealth elements. That never came about, that's just in the novel. But yeah, so there was a few kind of... It's a shame because the DLC that got cancelled actually sounds really interesting and like it would be cool and add to the story. But instead we got 5 million entries into the Colosseum, but it's fine. And then we've got Metal Remix of the Chocobo theme in 13.2. So, yeah, so everybody knows the Chocobo theme. In 13.2, because of a paradox, there is Paradox Chocobos, which look like red macaws. and they're meant to be more aggressive, and they eat more gazelle greens than normal chocobos. And this really heavy rock song plays anytime you, like, anytime you've mounted them and are just kind of roaming around. It's a hilariously metal song that plays for these fucking chocobos. It's great. Then why can't fal'Cie speak? Because gods can't speak. And the original god, who is called Mwyn, she couldn't speak in the way that humans can. And her son, Bunavelza, he can also not speak. So when he created his 3 deities, Pulse, Lindsay and Etro, they can't fucking speak either in the same way that humans can. It's more visions and sensations and kind of feelings. That's kind of more how they communicate. The only exception is Barthandelus, who was made specifically to be the voice of the Sanctum. And then you've got Orphan's final phase, but again, that's only because he absorbed Barthandelus. But yeah, so they can't speak because the gods that created them can't speak. And that will be important for later. Nora, Japanese meaning. So in the first game, Hope's mother's name is Nora, and the kind of ragtag group of friends that Snow has, they are also called Nora. In English, it's an acronym for No Obligations, Rules or Authority, which makes them sound like a weird gang, and it's fucking cheesy, it's funny. In Japanese, it is a pun for the word Noraneko, so it just means stray cat, because they're all meant to be a bunch of strays that have kind of found family together, and they've got this friendship and they'll stick together and look out for each other. So yeah, different meaning from the English version. I don't envy the English localization team for having to come up with a double meaning of how they could link the name Nora with their group, but yeah, pretty different. And then we've got the 7th arc. So there was originally, you visit one of the arcs, which is a kind of mythological area in like Pulse lore, where Lissy were meant to get trained and where a bunch of monsters were kept in case there was any invaders. You visit there, you level up, whatever. The 7th arc was meant to be another arc you could have visited where you would fight fal'Cie at the end called Nemesis. This was dummied out, but you can still find it in the game's files, which people have done, and you can also find Nemesis, but the fight is unwinnable. And so they reused the Nemesis fal'Cie in 13.2 as Adam, who is a Paradox fal'Cie that you fight in Augusta Tower. And then we've got cancelled LR novels, so Lightning Returns. So yeah, there was originally supposed to be a novel released that would, I think it was called Chronicles of the Chaotic Era. And it was essentially a prequel to the game that would follow the events of the chaos being unleashed into Grand Pulse and the world merging with Valhalla, and how the characters would deal with that. The characters that are alive and awake, how they would deal with it. That got cancelled because the author was sick. So yeah, unfortunately it just got cancelled. But it kinda gets a little reference and some, I don't know, some closure with that in the epilogue novel for Lightning Returns, which is called Reminiscence, Tracer of Memories. Then we've got the Chocobo chick, is Chocolina. So yep, the little Chocobo chick that lives in Saz's afro that he bought for his little boy in the first game is actually a little female Chocobo chick. Her name is Chocolina, and in 13.2 you run into a lady in a Chocobo costume who is a time-travelling shopkeeper. And it's not really, it's explained in DLC, Saz's DLC, which is just a casino minigame really. But yeah, she is, they are one and the same. The Chocobo chick wished that she'd be able to help all of her friends that she loves so much, and Etro was like, cool, how about you turn into a time-travelling shopkeeper? And so yeah, that's what happened. Then we have Vanille has an extra ATB gauge at the beginning of Final Fantasy XIII. She's already a Lissy. It's pretty straightforward, but it is something that's easy to miss. You just kind of go with it. But yeah, when you get to play as Vanille and Hope at the Vestige, you do play as Vanille as the kind of main character there, and she does have more ATB than the rest of the characters. Because, yeah, so even though you don't use magic as her, because she wouldn't use magic in front of Hope, because to give away that she's a Lucy, she does still have more ATB than the other characters, because, yep, she's secretly a Lucy the whole time. And then we've got Alyssa was a paradox. So Alyssa Zidell is a character in Final Fantasy XIII 2. You first meet her at Lake Brescia, no, the Brescia Ruins, in 5AF. It's like one of the first missions in the game. But you meet her there, and she's trying to uncover a graveyard that has been covered up by a paradox. And she's pretty obsessed with finding it. And after you defeat Atlas, the graveyard reappears. She shows up, and the grave that she was looking for is in memory of a bunch of people that died there during the Purge, because they get basically like crushed by like rocks while they were hiding in the caves and suffocated to death. Which she mentions that she has like nightmares about suffocating. But the name that is on this memoriam is her friend's name, it's not hers. And that is because she is a paradox. Her friend was supposed to survive and she wasn't. The reason she's been having these dreams about dying is because she did die. And then she finds out, she basically figures out that she's a paradox. She's kind of an asshole, to be honest, like even before she knows that. And they're talking about how Cocoon is going to fall in the future and it'll doom a bunch of people. She's like, well, it's not really our problem because it's not going to affect us now. Whereas everybody else is like, no, we should still try and help. But yeah, she finds out she's a paradox. And she's like, well, rather than accept my fate with grace, I'm going to be a huge asshole and I'm going to try and trick Noel and Sarah, so I'll send them off with this artifact that is rigged to send them to the Unseen Realm so that Caius can kick their ass, and then I'm going to try and assassinate Hope. And she almost does it, but the paradox is resolved and she disappears. And that's how it ends. She is in Lightning Returns in a way. She's kind of exists as a paradox, and she does apologise for trying to murder the shit out of Hope, but I mean, yeah, I don't really like her as a character. She's fucking annoying. Then we've got deities in the trilogy. So I kind of mentioned them earlier. So the original one is One. She had a son called Bunavelza, who's the god of light. He wanted everything to be perfect, and he saw his mother as an imperfection to his rule, so he murdered her. She fell into the Unseen Realm, and he was obsessed with the fact that because she didn't seem fully dead, he's like, no, she's going to come back and she's going to ruin everything, she's going to destroy the universe just to spite me. So what I got to do is I got to find a way into the Unseen Realm so that I can kill her permanently. She isn't good enough dead, she needs to be exceptionally dead. So he creates Pulse, who creates the World Pulse, and then he creates Etro, and he's like, oh shit, she looks like my mother, so she's not getting any powers. And then he creates Lindsay. Etro and Bunavelza and Wynn are the only gendered gods. Pulse and Lindsay don't have genders. Pulse looks masculine and Lindsay looks feminine, but they don't have genders in the Japanese version. So yeah, that's the kind of main gods, although technically Pulse, Lindsay and Etro aren't gods, they are also fal'Cie, they're just very powerful fal'Cie. But yeah, the main gods, Bunavelza and Wynn, but Wynn is dead, Bunavelza is not. Well, he is not even really at the end of the trilogy. He goes into a crystal sleep and tasks his kids with finding a way to open the gate. Etro kills herself to get his attention, it doesn't work. And Lindsay and Pulse are basically set to look for the gate opening and maintain the world and maintain the people, well, the creations of the fal'Cie and stuff, until they can find Wynn and kill her permanently. And then we've got Lightning also had the eyes of Etro. So yeah, in 13.2, a big driving force is that the reason Yule keeps dying over and over is because dying young is because she has something called the Eyes of Etro, which is an ability to see the future, but you can't control it. And anytime you do use it, it takes off a piece of your life. So Caius wants to destroy time so that there is no longer any change in timeline, therefore there's no visions of the future, and therefore Yule is free forever. Sarah also gets the Eyes of Etro because she was in crystal stasis, and so she got more chaos in her heart, and so she got this ability from Etro. But Lightning actually also has it. You can see her use it at the beginning of the game, just before Noel arrives in Valhalla. She has a vision, but because she's in Valhalla, it's not dangerous to her because she's already in a timeless realm. So she can use those visions as much as she wants. It's not going to hurt her. But anybody else who's in the normal world is getting their life cut short. And then we've got Saz as a widower. Again, it's kind of hinted at in the games. I believe it's spelled out in one of the novels. But yeah, Saz, his wife died before the events of the games of an illness, I believe it was. So he is the sole carer of Daj, which is why he's also super protective over him, because he's his only family that's left. And then we've got Lumina's real identity. So this is a problem with Lightning Returns fucking localization, which is just terrible. A lot of people don't get who Lumina is. They think she is Sarah, or she's some permutation of Sarah, or she's something, she's not what she's actually intended to be, which is she is Lightning. She's Lightning's child self. Lightning's mother died. So her father died when she was quite young. Her mother died when she was 14 or 15. I think she's 14. And so from that point onwards, she adopted her persona of Lightning so that she could be tough, so she could look after Sarah, and because she didn't want anybody to feel sorry for her. So that is why Lumina is got the appearance of a 14-year-old. That's why she's kind of bratty, and why she's got such a problem with Lightning is because she is Lightning, and she keeps calling her out about how shitty she's been because it's Lightning. It's just her younger self. And 13.2 was originally disconnected from the first game. Yep. So yeah, it was supposed to just take place in the future, and it was Noel was kind of established to be the main character, but then they kind of decided, well, if we're going to have it be a sequel to 13, we probably should try and tie it in with the first game in a way, other than it just taking place on the same kind of universe. So that's why it was kind of made into a story about time travel. That's why Sarah was added in, because she didn't get to be a party member in the first game, so they changed that up for the second game by having her front and centre alongside Noel. Then we're about to move into the final tier. So there's a lot here that is not properly explained. Oh god. So heart, soul and body. This is not explained as a concept at all in English. So in Japanese it's established that humans are made up of 3 components. So there's the physical shell, there's your body, there's your soul, which can be reborn again because there's a limited number of souls in Final Fantasy XIII. And then there's your heart, which is made of chaos and it's unique to you, and it sort of envelops the soul and keeps it hidden, keeps it safe. This is not explained in English at all. Instead, in English it's just kind of like soul and heart is used interchangeably, which makes 13 more confusing than it needs to be. It's more especially Lightning Returns, because a huge proponent of that is about souls and hearts, and you need to understand the difference between the two. So yeah, your heart is meant to be you. It's what makes you unique. It's what gives you emotions. It's what XIII gave humans to make them all unique. And to also keep the balance of chaos good, because then it's kind of getting moved around all the time. There's not going to be a big build-up, or there shouldn't have been. Whereas souls, it's more of a fragment of light that's supposed to get reborn again and again. The chaos from the soul, that gets cleansed after the human dies, but the soul can then be reborn with a new heart. But yeah, in English they're just interchangeable, and that makes Lightning Returns way more confusing. Because God can see souls, he cannot see hearts, but in English he apparently can't see souls or hearts. Or maybe he can see souls, but maybe he can't, because they fucked up and they made them interchangeable. And then another confusing thing is Caius has the physical heart of XIII, so it is like an actual organ, like the actual organ, but it's made of chaos, but it's not an emotion. It is a physical heart of chaos that is keeping him immortal. That is a little confusing, but I think it's just because of the whole reason that there isn't the same kind of differences in words when it comes to English as it is with Japanese. So heart is just heart in English. It can obviously mean like you put a lot of heart into things versus, you know, you literally like have a heart in your chest. But yeah, so it's just like it's a physical heart he has, and it's pumping chaos into his body, and that's what's keeping him immortal. Bunavelza localization changes. This is a big one. A really big one. So, in English, he's kinda just like the Christian God, by which I mean he's fucking boring. He's just like a fucking guy, to be honest. He wants everybody to be pure. He's gonna, for some reason, possess everybody so that he'll be their collective heart and soul, and everybody will be happy, which doesn't explain why the fuck he kidnapped Hope and changed him specifically and not anybody else, but yeah. So in English, he is the god of light. He wants Lightning to become the replacement for XIII because he just needs someone to do it. And he thinks humans are impure, the dead should be forgotten so everybody can be happy. Because souls are actually linked with memory, so if a soul is destroyed, the memories of the person it belonged to is gone forever. But yeah, so it's just kind of a purity thing in English. It's quite boring. And also he just has a voice. He just can speak. It's never explained. He can just speak, and that's fine. Japanese, on the other hand, he has one soul vessel, and that is Hope, who he already chose. It had nothing to do with Lightning being XIII's replacement, because he initially didn't even consider it. He chose Hope because of how well he did in Final Fantasy XIII too, and because he took up a leadership role and everybody liked him during the chaotic era. So he instead wanted him to be his soul vessel, but he didn't like that he had all this fucked up trauma, and that's why he looks like his 14-year-old self, even though he's mentally still like 27. Because he's physically regressed to an age where he's still considered pure by Bunavelza. And also, because we've already established that gods can't speak in the same way that humans can, same with Fal'Cie, yeah, he speaks with Hope's voice in Japanese. He doesn't just have some guy's voice, he speaks with Hope's voice because he literally wouldn't be able to speak otherwise. At the beginning of the game, when he wakes Lightning up, he doesn't speak. He's just a ball of light. But he can actually speak with Hope's voice because he has possessed Hope. That's a big change. And then there's also the fact that in Japanese, it's not just that he wants Lightning to be the replacement for Etro, just for the sake of, oh, he needs someone to look, like, kind of deal with the dead people. It's because he's infatuated with her. Like, that's just a thing that happens. Like, it's like, if you can look up the differences in the battle quotes, but in English it's just kind of generic shit like, oh, and now the real test begins. Well done, great, haha, oh no, I'm dying. Whereas in Japanese he's like saying shit like, submit your body to me, I will dominate you, and all this fucking weird stuff. So yeah, they cut that out in English. It's just so weird. I don't know why they made such big changes, but yeah, it's completely fucking different in Japanese. It's actually insane. I highly suggest looking up more detailed information on this, but it is honestly insane how different it is. Related to that, Bunavels' true plans. So he chose Hope as his soul vessel because he can't see chaos, so he can't see hearts, so he can't truly understand or empathise with humans. So to try and learn and be a more beneficial god, he decides that he wants to possess someone and live amongst humans, and he thinks that'll help him understand, and that'll like make him a better, more like well-respected and loved god. So that's why he decides to possess Hope, because Hope is already in a leadership position, he's already kind of proven himself. So he chooses him as his vessel, his soul vessel, but again, he's got a purity thing, so he's like, nah, you're too fucked up, so I need to turn you back into a child when you weren't so fucked up. Still mentally an adult, but yeah. And in doing so, he accidentally accidentally absorbs Hope's heart, which is why he's all fucked up in the game and he doesn't really have emotions, because God accidentally absorbed them. But his true plans is that he's going to possess Hope, he's going to live amongst all the humans, so that he can learn more about them, he can learn to see their hearts in his own way, but still be worshipped and loved as an almighty god. And then related again to Lightning Returns, I suppose 13.2, chaos stops aging, but it doesn't stop illness or death. So after 13.2, Sarah no fuck up, Kai's kind of kills himself, but they don't save the day. In fact, their intervention causes the Heart of Chaos to be destroyed, and so Etro dies. Because again, like I mentioned, Caius has the physical heart of Etro, he has the Heart of Chaos beating in his chest. When that gets destroyed, Etro dies. The goddess of death who was looking after the chaos and making sure there wasn't a big outbreak, she's gone. Fucking dunzo. The gate opens up and the land is flooded with chaos. And the chaos stops aging, which the people notice quite quickly. They realise, oh, that we aren't getting older anymore, but they also notice that they aren't having children anymore. That's also a side effect of the chaos. They won't age, but they also can have kids, and they also can still die via illness and being murdered. So you can still die, you just don't age anymore. And then we've got AMP technology. So AMP is antimatter manipulator principle. That is how Snow has like a magical jacket, or how the airships can fly in 13. It's just, or how the gravity device that Lightning uses at the beginning of the first game. That's all AMP technology. It's not magic, but it kinda is, but it's not. It's their own science to answer to magic. It can be used for a bunch of different things, and in the epilogue novel we find out that that technology actually could be used to control chaos. But then Bunavels got involved and that research all went to hell. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. But yeah, moving on to the makers, both Lindsay and Pulse The Maker is mentioned a bunch in Final Fantasy XIII, but they're never really specified who they're talking about. With the other two games coming out, people thought, oh, so they're talking about Bunavelza. They're not. The Cocoon deities are just talking about Lindsay. They're talking about Lindsay coming back and everything being great, them remaking the world, even though, no, Lindsay would not be coming back to do that. The whole point was for everybody to die so that Bunavelza could get woken up and kill his mother. And then Caius merged with his Eidolon, which is why he can transform into Bahamut. Yeah, so most of the summons are summoned via an Eidolith, which is a little crystal, comes out of the Lassie brand, and that's how you summon your Eidolon. But an old ritual on Pulse allowed for Lassie or magic users in general to merge with their Eidolon, and they could just transform into them straight up rather than fighting alongside them. And that's what Caius did. It is very risky and not a lot of people were able to do it, but Caius was. And then we've got, I think it's Aide is how it's pronounced. It's a Greek name, but she is a character from the novels only. She never appears in game, despite the fact that she's actually quite important. So the Ultimania for the first game has a side story. It has 3 different characters, and Aide is one of them. And your dragons, fuck. Oh god, I don't know if I have the mental fortitude to do Drakenir, but yeah. But back to Aide. She was a reporter. She showed up to the Pulse thinking, to the Purge, thinking it was a bunch of bullshit, that the Sanctum were just fear-mongering, and that she was going to expose it all. And be like, hey, look how they're trying to control us. But then she didn't realise, oh actually, it's not that it is fake, there is no Pulse danger, but it's not that they're just going to take people to a new location, it's that they're just going to fucking kill them and commit genocide. She gets saved by Team Nora, they escape to the ruins, she films a bunch of the footage of the Purge and what's going on, and then at the end of the game, once Fang Vanille sacrifice themselves, she goes to the cavalry and shows them the footage so that the Sanctum can't raise up as the government again, and that's how the Academy is formed, to become the new political party if they look after the people of Cocoon. Then there's a Terminator fallacy, again that is from the side story. That is one of the other characters who's like this kind of genius. She finds out stuff that she's not meant to find out. She finds out about plans to destroy Cocoon, and so a Terminator fallacy finds out about it and starts hunting her down, and she has to run about and try and figure out a way to warn everybody, and try and save the day independent of the main party who are off at Grand Pulse and try to figure out what the fuck to do. Also, I should mention with Aide, she also appears in the epilogue novel for Lightning Returns. It's not revealed right away who she is, it's just a reporter, and then when she meets Team Nora she gets her memories back and she remembers who she was in the old world. But she interviews a bunch of the characters, you find out what's going on with them, and she also finds out about stuff that happened during the chaotic era because Hope tells her what's going on, and that's how we also find out about a bunch of interesting stuff that happened that we'll get into in a minute. Humanity's creation. So humans were not originally created by God, they were created by Lindsay because Etro killed herself to try and get Bunavelza's attention, which didn't work, and then she faded into the Unseen Realm. Lindsay was like, oh hang on a minute, I can work with this, and it created humans from the blood, thinking that, well, if Etro died and went into the Unseen Realm, surely these humans will also die and go into the Unseen Realm, and we can figure out a way how to get through and win. So that's how it happened. They were made from the blood of a goddess that killed herself. And then Snow reminds Lightning of her dad. That is in episode 0. That is a reason why she does not like him, because she thinks he's unreliable and that he's just kind of an asshole. So yeah, that's why she does not like him, is because Snow reminds her of her father and his shortcomings, when really Snow is actually very reliable. He is a dumbass, and he's very hasty, and yeah, he's just an idiot. But he does take care of Sarah, and he does a better job of it than Lightning does in the first game. So yeah, Lightning was wrong. Yule was the first human, so yeah, related to humanity's creation. The first human to be made from Etro's blood was Yule, the very first Yule, and she was made to look like Etro. So she is what human Etro would look like. Lindsay made her that way on purpose. And Yule being the first human is also unique because when she was also the first one to die. When she passed into Valhalla, she didn't melt into the chaos for her soul to be reborn. She just kind of wandered around, and Etro noticed her. Yules are unique because they don't melt into the chaos, so instead she was the same kind of soul and memories was sent back, but it was fractured unknowingly, so a bit of her soul was left behind, which kind of powered up the chaos. And yeah, that kind of leads to disaster, which we're going to get into. The unseen chaos's true nature. It's Yule. It's all of the Yules, because they're reborn, but every time they are reborn, a bit of them splinters off into the chaos and it powers it up. And so that's kind of building and building and building. And then when the heart of chaos is destroyed and the gate opens, the unseen chaos bursts through with the normal chaos, and it's even more powerful than before. And it transforms Pulse into Nova Chrysalia and nearly destroys the whole world right away, but a small portion. And then we have the Rose-Haired Phantom, which is so interesting and so fucking weird, and it's never brought up in the game. So this is only mentioned in the epilogue novel. But, so during the chaotic era, a bunch of bullshit happened. Vanille and Fang were still asleep. Nobody knew where Lightning was. Sarah was dead. So the only people kind of left to deal with shit was Hope, Snow, Saz, and Noel. And they all kind of made a pact to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to stop this chaos. We're going to protect people, yada yada yada. So Hope essentially becomes the leader of the world, even though he's like, oh fuck, I don't know what I'm doing. But people listen to him, they're happy to wait. Snow and Noel fight a bunch of monsters. Saz flies his ship around trying to kind of help find resources. But eventually they all kind of start to fall apart because Daj goes to sleep and never wakes up. So Saz is out of the game. Then Noel becomes more and more guilt-ridden because he was technically the one that killed Caius, so he separates himself away. And meanwhile, Hope's already having a bad time because he's promised everyone he's going to figure out how to stop the chaos and how they'll go back to normal, but he has no fucking clue how to do it. But he's got a big science team working away to figure out, like, research, and eventually they figure out EMP technology can control chaos. But then all of a sudden, the scientists start going missing. And they start going missing one by one with only one message left behind. And that is, the woman with the rose hair takes us with her. And Hope's pretty suspicious, like, oh fuck, someone's messing with me. And I think it's God, and he's right. It's God. Boonavels deliberately isolating him away and making him feel hopeless. And then once the last scientists are taken away, it creates an opening with all that despair that Hope's feeling that Boonavels can now use the hallucination on him. And at first, he just sees it out the corner of his eye, and it is just kind of a flash of pink you can see. And so he tries to ignore it, and then it gets worse. And then he finally realises, oh, hang on a minute, I think it might be lightning. Which it isn't, but because he thinks that, he then starts seeing it as lightning, and he starts hearing her talking to him. And she basically drives him insane for like hundreds of years, until he's so broken that he just willingly goes with her. and he just goes to Bunavelza willingly because he's like, well, I don't care anymore. And then Bunavelza reveals that nope, Lightning, the real one, is actually alive, and she'll be coming back as the Liberator of Souls. So that kind of snaps him out of it for a second, and he sends a message to his friends saying, look out for the fake Lightning, but the real Lightning will come back. And then he gets kidnapped, taken away, tortured, transformed back into his physical younger self. And that's why in the main game, the only allusion to this in the main game is the beginning where Snow attacks Lightning, because he isn't sure if it's really her, because again he got that message from Hope, and it comes up again, and that's why he tests Lightning by locking himself away with a magic gate that can only be opened with the pendant, with Sarah's engagement pendant, because he knows the real Lightning will know to use that, but a fake one never will. And yeah, Bunavelza doesn't bother using a fake Lightning on anybody else, he only uses it on Hope. And then who's Lightning visiting at the end of Lightning Returns? Well, they said that they want it to be ambiguous. Anybody, it can be anybody. It doesn't really matter. But if you want a more definitive answer, it's Hope. She's going to go see Hope at the end of Lightning Returns. He's the only one that hasn't seen her, and he's super depressed about it. And it's to match up with how he's the last soul that she saves in the game. So yeah, he's the one that she's going to go visit at the end of the game. And then let's get into theories. First, I'm going to have a drink. If you've got any questions, pop them. I will just put this on mute for a second. Okay, we're back. Who is ready to finish this with some theories? Alrighty, so depression is an overarching theme in the trilogy. I'd say this is almost not a theory because it is quite consistent over the trilogy, how people are dealing with kind of like depression. I'd say it's more prominent in the first game and the third game. 13-2, it's not so much there. It's more of a brighter game. It's a brighter game with a fucked up ending. But it's certainly a big factor in the first and the third game. The first game, everybody's at like their kind of darkest and worst selves, not knowing kind of how to move forward, and that's why the Eidolons are a big part, because they kind of show up to get their ass in gear and put them back on the right path. Whereas the third game, it's, again, everybody's got depression again, but it's more lightning is interfering to try and help them, even though she's also fucked up, but yeah. So it's an overarching theme in 2/3 of the trilogy, not so much in the second one. Magic exists in the New World as in maybe Earth at the end of Lightning Returns. I've only kind of seen this mentioned because in the epilogue novel, Chocolina can maybe transform from human into chocobo. We don't know, but when Aide meets with Saz, he doesn't want to give up any information about where everybody else is. He's like, no, I don't know, even though, yeah, he does. But Chocolina does. She gives Aide a note that tells her the location of a diner where Team Nora work. It's the diner they own. And then when she's done reading the note, she looks up and Chocolina has disappeared, but there's a couple of feathers left behind. Chocolina in Lightning Returns can turn into a chocobo, or she can stay in her human form. So maybe it does exist in the New World as well. We don't know, but it could. Linear gameplay reflects the themes of the narrative, so this is more so for the first game because 13.2 and Lightning Returns really correct on the linearity. They're quite open, whereas the first game is very mimetically linear, but it does reflect the themes of the narrative because where the game is most linear is on Cocoon, and the whole point is that the characters are meant to be on a path from birth that they are set on by the fal'Cie, and they are just kind of rambling down to this predetermined destiny that they don't get to choose their fate. They are just, like, even if they think they're defying it, they aren't. They're getting pushed along to the final end point of destroying Orphan, and there's nothing much they can do about it. And it only really opens up once they get to Grand Pulse, where they are out of the reach, well, mostly, of the Cocoon fal'Cie, except Bartandalis, and they can actually, like, roam free and explore and uncover things for themselves. And then once you get back to Cocoon, you're back to linearity because you're on that kind of final march to get to Orphan's Cradle to kill Bartandalis, and then, oh, oopsie, well, here comes Orphan, guess we just kill him too. But yeah, it does reflect the narrative, but the question is, do people really want that? Does that make a fun game? I think it's fine. I enjoy the game, but a lot of people don't want that. They want something more open, and that's fine, but again, it didn't bother me. Sarah has PTSD, so this is more kind of hinted at in 13.2 and in the epilogue novel. In 13.2, when Alyssa finds the gravesite for her friends, the people that died in the Purge, she talks about how she has like her nightmares and she sometimes wonders if she's even awake or if she even exists. And Sarah says, oh, you too? She's something like that. With the kind of implication being that Sarah still has nightmares about being in crystal stasis and that she isn't actually awake, that she isn't free. And she talks about how guilty she feels and how she was like, how do they make up for the fact that they caused the Purge? And then at the end of the epilogue novel, when Sarah shows up, she's kind of depressed. Everybody, well, not everybody else, but most of the characters except Hope seem to be doing pretty okay. But Sarah seems kind of a bit more down. She still remembers that she died. She still remembers what that was like. She's annoyed that she wasn't able to like help more in Lightning Returns. That she was out of commission. She's And she also mentioned about how she's upset that she has to kind of remember everything that they went through, that she can't just be someone new and enjoy life. So Sarah having PTSD, there is actually some, like, kind of, there's some evidence to back up that theory. It's not super delved into, but there's hints. And in combat roles, a match the character's personalities at points in the story. Yeah, so this is actually like something I came up with. Not to toot my own horn about putting my own theory in here, but this was something I noticed. But yeah, so the way that character roles unlock, it matches their personalities at that point in the story. So Snow is the first one to unlock the Sentinel role, which is you're basically a human shield and you distract the enemies away from the other party members so they attack you. And that fits Snow as his personality because he wants to be the hero. He wants to protect everybody sincerely, and he wants to be the one to take the hit. Lightning gets Commando, the basically kind of warrior role. Like she's the leader, but again, she's an asshole at the beginning of the game, so she doesn't really want to be a leader. She's more so just looking after herself, so she unlocks that role, and even during like combat at the beginning of the game, she'll like tell the other characters to just stay out of her way and just let her fight. And then as the story goes on, like after she's fought Odin, well no, just before she's fought Odin, her and Hope have teamed up and she now has to kind of look after him as well. She unlocks the medic role, which shows like her growth of like becoming more of a like caring person. She's starting to kind of de-ice a little bit. But one that's really good is that Vanille unlocks the Saboteur role really early. And that's because Vanille is actually the pulseless sea that caused everything alongside Fang. So both of them get Saboteur roles. And that's like just cool hinting at them being outside forces, other than the fact that nobody else in the game has an Australian accent in English. But yeah, so that's like a little theory I've always had. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of, I think it might have been a deliberate choice. Colosseum in 13.2 links all of the Final Fantasy worlds. I remember seeing this theory quite a bit after 13.2 was released and all the kind of DLC. It's a theory I like because you can fight all these kind of different monsters and whatnot from the other games. So yeah, no, it's kind of a straightforward theory. The Colosseum is like its own dimension. It's not part of any main timeline, it is its own kind of wee pocket, so it being directly linked to the rest of the Final Fantasy worlds, I think it could happen. I don't think it's completely out there. The ATB paradigm system was a natural evolution of the turn-based system. Yeah, well, I mean, kind of, like it is essentially, you're still kind of in a turn-based system. It is an evolution of that, but it is different enough that people didn't like it. I do. I think it's actually very good. It's all about strategy, especially as you go on. You cannot button mash in Final Fantasy XIII once you're past like the kind of tutorial areas. You do need to think out fights. You need to think out your paradigms. It is like a turn-based system in that way. You shouldn't just be button mashing. And you definitely wouldn't be. People who say you do in Final Fantasy XIII clearly haven't beat the game, because there is no way you're fighting a fucking, I don't know, like the final boss. You're not fighting Orphan's first form and button mashing. Like that's just not going to happen. You're not going to walk away from that fight winning. But yeah, no, it does seem like it was a natural evolution of that. I agree. Opera Omnia is canon. Opera Omnia is a Dissidia game. It's a mobile game. And it seems to like have a lot of kind of, I don't know, it does kind of seem to have a lot of basis that it is canon, but it's a side game, so it's not completely confirmed. For 13, it seems to take place just after the characters are in the new world. It seems to take place just after the epilogue in Lightning Returns, because although the characters appear as their 13 selves at first, they do start to regain their memories, and they do remember Bunavelza, and they remember that they won. So it seems to take place after the epilogue, at least. I think it could be canon, but again, it's because it's a side game, it's kind of tricky territory. But there is like a lot of good information in there that makes sense. And then Final Fantasy XIV is canon. So in Lightning Returns, you can unlock the Miqo'te garb for Lightning to wear after you do a little side quest where you find all the Chocobo girls. And Hope mentions that there is a mythical land called Eorzea, which is the world in Final Fantasy XIV. And then Lightning actually appeared in a crossover event for Final Fantasy XIV. So it does seem like it is canon in a way to the Final Fantasy XIII world. It is a different world, but it seems like it is canon that this still exists within Final Fantasy XIII. And then I put, again, the new world is Earth. I put that in theories as well as the other tier, because the answer is maybe. It looks a lot like Earth, but the answer we have gotten so far is a resounding, maybe. We don't know. But it looks a lot like it. And then our last point is a lot of the hate for the trilogy was purely mimetic. Yep, I agree. I think a lot of it was just the kind of gaming culture at the time. There was so at the time this released at the same time as Nier Gestalt, which is a favourite of mine. And both of those games got shat on a lot. And a big reason for it is because they're Japanese games. And that was a huge thing at the time. There was so much hate for games coming out of Japan at the time in the West. And it was just down to racism. Like, it's a sad but true fact. That is what was going on at the time. And I think a lot of the hate for this game kind of came from that. And just the fact that it was fun for people to hate on it. So they did it. They just hated on it. Because a lot of the hate you'll see for it is just the same shit over and over again. It's just parroted, it's just regurgitated. Lightning's female cloud, Lightning has no personality, blah blah blah. Oh, I hate how Hope doesn't kill Snow. That subplot was stupid. What was even the point? And it's like, I'm sorry that the 14-year-old didn't murder an adult man, you fucking freaks. Like, it's, yeah. I do think a lot of the hate was pointless. And it was just people wanting to be mad at something. Because then, after the trilogy was done, and Final Fantasy XV came out, all of a sudden, people start defending 13. You'll still get people saying, nope, it's terrible, blah, 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 but it's kind of like the whole Zelda fan routine, where as soon as a new game gets released, the old one is good. Because I think people forget how hated Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy XII were when they got released. People fucking hated those characters, except for Lulu and Auron, and except for Balthier. That's it. But now, people like them, and I think it might just be because the generation that grew up playing those games are like older now and are on the internet, so they can talk about how they like them, and I think that's what's happened with 13. Whereas the people who were all talking about it before were all kind of fanboys of the older games, and so they're just pissed off that they weren't getting the same thing over and over again. But yeah, no, I definitely think a lot of it was just mimetic. It definitely deserves a lot more love and more. I think people just need to give it a chance. There is issues. I don't think the trilogy's perfect, and there is so many localization changes and issues that we have discussed. And there's even stuff I haven't brought up. So I guess I'll bring it up now. So in the English version of Final Fantasy XIII, the first game, Lightning smiles less, and it's for no reason. It's so weird, and it's just so weird. She gets given like a neutral expression, or she looks annoyed instead of smiling, and it happens a few times. It's very strange. I don't know why it happened, but yeah, but again, and then there's like story changes and just kind of translation problems because the first game had such a bad dev cycle. The script was changed a lot, that there's stuff that just doesn't make sense. But, you know, it's not really... It's still forgivable, I'd say. I still enjoy it quite a bit. So yeah, if you haven't given it a go, it's pretty cheap. It's backwards compatible on the Xbox, so you might even be able to get it cheaper on that. It looks great. But yeah, no, definitely, I would say if you get the chance, give the trilogy a shot, because I think it really deserves it. It's a lot of fun, there's a lot of heart, and I really like the characters. I think they've got really good arcs. But yeah, I think we'll just wrap this up now. I think I've been rambling for long enough. But thank you for everyone for joining in the stream and listening to me ramble about Final Fantasy XIII. For how long have we been going? Over an hour? Jesus. An hour and 35? Fuck's sakes. Well, anyway, have a good night, everybody. I'll see you later.